Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Cryptic Humility. It's been a long time since we spoke, just us two, so I really wanted to take a moment to give you guys some updates about how the podcast is doing. First, I hope everybody has been enjoying all the guest speakers that we've been having on the podcast. I think to date, we're close to having 20 guests on the show, and we're just a little over halfway since the podcast started. So I want to say thank you to everybody that's been listening to us, tuning in, and checking in on the latest crypto news and education. Speaking of crypto news, I've made a lot of adjustments to the podcast. And as I'm explaining this to you guys, I'm going to put up the top 10 cryptocurrencies this week and their prices. And hopefully, you guys can see I've actually updated our podcasting software. So the quality should be better, the audio should be better, and we're constantly improving the podcast for you. I appreciate everybody that's been staying with us through these adjustments. But each week, I want to cover the current news as we have guest speakers on. We have a guest speaker coming on later on in the show in about 10 minutes or so. So we're going to go over some current news, and none of this is truly current, but I know that we've been doing so much conversating with guests that I just don't want anybody to get lost in the sauce about what we've been talking about in crypto. So I just want to recap on some really important things that are happening in the space right now to make sure that you're in touch with what's going on. First thing that I'd love for us to talk about is that I am in the North Shore area of Massachusetts, and I went to Boston Blockchain this past week that was hosted by MIT and some people that have worked with MIT and sponsors and such. I'm going to put everything up on the screen for you guys to view. And there were some huge industry leaders that came. I'm going to put up their names too, just because everybody knows that I butcher names. But it was absolutely incredible, very insightful, and just very hopeful for the future of crypto. And I made a lot of good connections there, a couple of new people that'll be coming onto the show. And I really want to hear from you guys about what you think Cryptic Humility is missing. Like who should we have on the show? What topics should we talk about? What still doesn't make sense to you? Again, we are here for true education. And I know that we've recapped a lot of education on the show in the last 6 months with people coming on. So I just want to make sure that you are getting the most out of this podcast and you feel like you are truly following along in the space. If something doesn't make sense, you can always leave a comment or always message me directly on LinkedIn. I am here for you to make sure that you excel in the crypto space. I also wanted to say, continuing on about Boston Blockchain, is that was a whole week event. I actually couldn't take time off from work and my regular day job. So I ended up just going to Solana Saturday, which was really insightful. We heard from somebody that was a part of the Solana Foundation. We heard from somebody that was managing Solflare, Solana's wallet, digital wallet. So very exciting to make connections there. And like I said, hopefully a couple people will be coming onto the show. I also want to let you guys know that on LinkedIn, on X, I'm going to be doing my best to be posting about these events that happen. Obviously, I know some people are international that I've already interviewed on the podcast. And also, there have been a couple people that have actually flown to these events. So I don't necessarily know if it matters if you're local or not, but I'm going to post everything that has to do with crypto in the blockchain world. So you're always in the loop about these events and you don't miss these opportunities. So that is all to be coming on the podcast too. The biggest news that we have to date that I know a lot of people already know, but we need to go over is that the SEC is finally regulating crypto. Now, what does this mean? Because we spent so many years in unregulated territory with crypto. So what is actually trying to be achieved? Okay, so I'm going to read you guys some stuff that I found on the SEC website, and I'm going to tag the SEC website below for you to take a look into it. I highly recommend reading into these articles that I'm listing because it will help you kind of steer clear of all the junk that's going on in the space and just give you direct answers about the regulation that's going on for crypto. So let's recap and talk about the FTC, which is the Federal Trade Commission. And it reads, primarily, its authority is to police deceptive and unfair practices related to crypto by bringing enforcement actions against crypto companies for fraud, such as false advertising about FDIC insurance, which another really important thing I think to mention is that when I worked at the bank, we had FDIC insurance for your money, meaning that let's say you had $300,000 in the bank. If the bank went under or got hacked or something happened, you would be insured $250,000 per person. It's really important to know that in regulation of crypto with the SEC and the FTC and all of these big organizations, they are claiming that crypto is not FDIC protected or insured. So it's really important to understand that crypto is a risk And, if you're trading on one of these platforms and, you get hacked or you lose your crypto, potentially, you're not going to be insured for that loss. So very, very crucial news to pay attention to. And of course, the SEC focuses on regulating crypto assets as securities. So what is the goal of this roundtable? And roundtable meaning that lately, the SEC, a bunch of these organizations have been getting together with global public leaders to create a conversation about what is going on in the crypto space. Up on the screen right now, you're going to see this video from the SEC website, which I'm going to attach a link down below for you to check out as well. Super insightful to watch if you want to stay in the loop about what these institutions and organizations are talking about in regards to crypto. I know that this was posted a while ago, is posted in March, so this isn't necessarily like breaking news, but I also think that if you're lost in the space, like you're on X and stuff, it can be kind of overwhelming to figure out where this information is. Definitely highly recommend you watch the roundtable to stay in the loop about what is next for crypto. But anyways, let's read through what these organizations are trying to achieve. So number one is clear regulatory guidelines, appropriate distinguish securities from non-securities, craft tailored disclosure frameworks, provide realistic paths to registration for both crypto assets and market intermediaries, and lastly, ensuring that investors have the information necessary to make investment decisions and make sure that enforcement resources are deployed fairly. So a lot of information there, but basically it's no different than how stocks are organized and regulated. I mean, of course it's going to be different because everything is moving to on-chain, which is our next topic that we need to discuss really briefly. But, they're not going to be talking about anything new besides crypto taxes, crypto regulations, capital gains. What is all of this looking like? The SEC breaks it down in the roundtable, and just if you're curious, definitely focus on the FTC, the SEC. Look into all these organizations because they provide clarity on the crypto space. Don't always rely on influencers on X. And I mean, obviously, I'm kind of outing myself there in a way, not to say that I'm an influencer. I really don't want to say that I'm an influencer. Just make sure that you're looking to government organization and authorities to find credible resources in this space, as I always promote. Going back to this roundtable event, I also just wanted to mention that BlackRock, Fidelity, and other huge corporations were finding agreements on crypto regulation. So I just felt like it was important to mention that BlackRock, Fidelity, all these huge institutions are a part of this. The IRS treats crypto like property. It doesn't treat crypto like currency. We're actually going to have a bookkeeper on the podcast shortly that specializes in crypto taxes and bookkeeping. So he will be able to guide us through this and give a bunch of examples. I don't want to spoil the episode, but I think it's important to understand how the IRS is also identifying crypto. Moving on, one of the most important things that is happening in the crypto space right now is that real world assets are moving on chain. Real estate, gold, oil, tangible items like art. You know how you would go to an art auction, for example, to sell your art? Well, now we are moving those items and tokenizing them, creating them as a token to move them on chain. So Nasdaq, the huge exchange, is looking into tokenizing their assets and being able to move those assets on chain. This is going to provide so many benefits for investors, open insights that weren't previously available, offer 24/7 involvement compared to traditional exchanges that are open at certain times and closed at certain times, even specifically like the FX market where I started. Nasdaq filed a proposal with the SEC, so this is slowly in motion, soon to be coming on. On the screen right now, there are 50 other companies, huge companies, and I'm sure there are more, and we'll touch upon them next time on the podcast, I promise. But there are 50 other companies that are moving on chain, moving to blockchain technology. We're going to have more transparency, especially with the blockchain, and I think that things should run a lot smoother. The last thing that I want to talk about before we move to our guest speaker today is I want to talk about the Texas Stock Exchange that is soon to be coming in mid-2026. This is current news. Some of you might have heard of this before, but it's supposed to be a digitalized exchange. So it's already supposed to be implementing all these things that Nasdaq is kind of trying to transform into. The exchange is based in Dallas, and it's supposed to to be a fully electronic national securities exchange. And I'm going to put some benefits up on the screen. If you are not watching on Spotify, I highly encourage you guys to check us out on YouTube because I post so many visuals as I'm talking, just because I sometimes feel like it's better to get information out that way without me just talking and rambling on for 20 minutes. But anyways, that's all the things that I think are really important to mention. As I said, I'm going to list all these things in the podcast description below. It is your job to do your own research and make sure that you are informed in the space. It is my job to make sure that I'm always providing those resources for you so you stay in the loop as your number one platform for crypto education and crypto news and guest speakers and trying to rebuild crypto's image in the United States and with some of our guests internationally. So without further ado, let's switch gears. We're going to be talking to somebody that has experience at Messari and a couple other companies in the crypto space. Colorado native, very, very excited to have this special guest on. I want to introduce RJ to the podcast. Thank you so much for coming on to the show. We're so excited to have you. And we're interested in hearing your background in crypto, kind of how you end up in the space, where you're from, and just anything you feel like would be good to share with people that are listening.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for having me. My first podcast I've ever done, so it's definitely going to be fun. I got started in crypto like many people, where you just see some random posts and it catches your interest, and then you fall down a rabbit hole, and the rest is history. So I did not have a formal education in finance or anything like that. I actually went to school for geography and had a day job doing GIS, if anybody knows what that is, making maps and whatnot. And I probably shouldn't say this, but ended up spending more time looking at crypto stuff than I did at making my GIS maps and maintaining databases and stuff like that. So I never really decided I need to take this as far as I can. I think I owe it to myself. And fast forward about 4 to 5 years later, I am now in a full-time crypto job and loving every minute of it.
That's amazing. I actually,
Yeah.
the last time we talked, I don't know if you had told me that you were in geography.
Yeah.
So that's a crazy change from like one career to
Yeah.
another.
Yeah. There was a lot of learning, a lot of going back and forth with ChatGPT. Thank goodness for AI coming and becoming a thing in the last couple of years, because I mean, to be honest, I feel like I've given myself a slight finance crypto education just by getting into the trenches and trying to understand anything and everything. And since then, I feel like I am a little bit dangerous and for the better, but definitely didn't come up with that educational background in like finance like a lot of my colleagues.
Yeah, so I went to school for international business and I concentrated in finance, but there are so many people that I talked to in the space that had no background in finance and were just intrigued by crypto and like the
Yeah,
future that presents itself with it. So I always find it interesting to find out where people have come from to enter into this market because, you know, more times than not, we're finding people that had no previous experience in finance or like traditional stocks. Even
for sure.
myself, like I went right into crypto. You know, I did work at the bank for a little bit right out of school, but like my whole interest was in blockchain, crypto, DeFi, and it's just, you know, it is the future and it's so intriguing and it allures a lot of people into the space. So you're originally from Colorado and you're still there, correct?
Yeah, I live in Fort Collins, about an hour north of Denver, if anybody knows where that is. Great area, but born and raised in Colorado and left for a little bit during college, but back and loving it.
Yeah, that's amazing. I had a good friend that went to school in Colorado and she loved it. So can't say that the crypto space out there is crazy,
No,
or is it?
no, it's not something I really think about too often. Probably because, as you said, it is not that big. It's not a big finance area of the world by any means. We're kind of out there in the middle of nowhere to a certain extent. Denver's pretty big, but not by East Coast standards or even West Coast standards. But not a lot of crypto stuff out here or finance in general. I know a couple people, to be honest, when I worked at my previous job at Messari that lived locally. It was a fully remote company, but I ended up finding out that there were several employees and colleagues at Messari that lived along what is called the Front Range, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I guess let's start out by talking about where you have worked previously in the crypto space
Yeah,
and maybe how you got that job too, since you have like you
yeah.
had no experience.
If I can do anything today, I would hope that, or convey anything and give the world anything, it's that betting on yourself and kind of forging your own path is arguably, in my opinion, one of the most fulfilling things I've done at my old age of 30 years old. And It's
Not
been,
even old. Not even
I
old.
mean, in crypto, it's kind of old, to be honest. It's getting old. But how old was I in 2019? Gosh, 6 years ago. So I was like 24 or 25 or whatever it was. I mean, like a lot of people, you hear about Bitcoin or whatever other crypto projects are going on in the world early on, and you kind of, they cross your timeline or your feed, and you're like, oh, okay, whatever. Cool. It's at $1,000 today. And you're like, all right, whatever. It's not going to keep on going. And then it keeps on going. And then COVID happens and we have this roaring asset bubble, and you're like, all right, this, I'm missing the boat. I'm missing something. And then you dive in. And that was me. And I got into it 19 early 2020 and was just kind of getting my feet wet and tried to conceptualize what the heck internet money and blockchains and all of these names meant, and trying to conceptualize how they fit in and compared to actual fiat money. So got down into the rabbit hole and tried to understand as much as I could. I ended up bugging my girlfriend, now wife, way too much talking about it, and was like, I need an outlet and I need a way to get these thoughts out in the world. So I ended up landing like a freelance article job with the Motley Fool. And that's where I spent some of my time, most of my time, writing articles on the current state of affairs in the market, revolving around mainly Bitcoin, Ethereum, some meme coins, DeFi. And they were quick hitters, but a good way, a good creative outlet to try and get my thoughts out there and kind of piece together a bunch of puzzles into how I understood the world. Very, very basic. I hope no one goes and reads those. It's very early on in my journey, and I'm not gonna like shy away from it. It is what it is, and that was my first step. And to me at the time, it was the coolest thing I could have been doing. And I'm not gonna knock myself for putting myself out there. I mean, I literally, like I said, didn't have a finance job, applied for that freelance position, and they gave it to me. And inevitably, like that forced me to learn more and more. And it was like that natural progression where, okay, I have people reading these things and I could see the numbers, like people are reading these things. And I took that seriously, and I wanted to make sure that I was producing information that was accurate, relevant, timely, and grounded in actual truth. Forced me to learn a lot, like I said, and inevitably I was like, I wanted more. I was enjoying it so much. I was still doing my geography job at the time, writing articles on the side, and ended up going on the job hunt for a full-time crypto job. And I got rejected and rejected and rejected and rejected and rejected. And long story short, I eventually got a gig with Messari, who I'm sure many of your listeners are probably familiar with. It's what I would call kind of a household name in crypto. They got started in 2017, which is now going on almost a decade, which is like an eternity in crypto, which is honestly
Right.
a testament to the company and the workers there and the services they provide. Learned 10 times more than I thought I ever would have learned. And that job shaped me to what I am today to a certain extent, and ultimately got me to my current job as a research associate, where I just kind of, I mean, I'm in the trenches now more than ever, and I am just staring at charts, slicing up data, trying to find signal. Whereas at Messari, I would equate it to my job was a mile wide and an inch deep, and now my area of focus is an inch wide and a mile deep. Like I'm trying to get down into the trenches, mainly around Bitcoin, because as we know, it leads the market typically. And if we can understand the movements of Bitcoin, that kind of serves as the measuring stick for where other assets might be headed, or where crypto in general is probably going. So by understanding Bitcoin, that's my main responsibility, really where like the majority of my time is spent.
And I think to break this down a little bit more, if you could explain to people a little bit more about Messari and maybe like go through some examples of what your typical day there was like, because I know it is very popular, but to beginners they might not know.
Yeah, Messari is, oh man, it's hard to even, it's the breadth of what they provide is, I mean, you could spend days on their platform, especially if you have like the upper tier subscription plan, just all kinds of data, and truly like a wealth of data information. They have their own AI bot, like an LLM basically, that is tailored towards crypto use cases, that is extremely helpful for trying to unpack recent developments and new technology. And you're like, okay, what is a roll up? What is a layer two? And what is this new consensus mechanism? And what is this and that? And the AI LLM is helpful in trying to help you connect the dots and stuff like that. Primarily, it is like a data platform for every blockchain out there, to be honest, that has any bit of relevance. They have these hardcore team of data analysts that source this data, cut it up, slice it up, and they're able to present it and package it onto their website. My main job there when I was there was a little bit different. It was on the Intel team, and my main job was to try and filter out all of the new developments and recent events that could be new votes in the governance platforms of these protocols, such as I'm trying to think of an example, like if you're familiar with like Maple Finance, they converted their token from Maple to Syrup.
Okay.
I
Yes.
get I like try to stay in the loop on that and see that there's a governance vote going on that's proposed initially. The proposal says we want to convert maple to syrup, and every one maple will be worth 100 syrup or whatever the conversion was. And my job was to see, that Maple was proposing this, distill the information, and turn it into what we called an Intel event. And if you were interested in Maple and you check marked it as an asset you were curious in, when that Intel event was published by me, you would then get the notification. And it was kind of like we acted as, to be honest, like a filter for X, Twitter, Discord, governance platforms, and trying to distill and synthesize all of the relevant information so that people that were trying to do this didn't have to do all that legwork. So that was really like the main proposition and service that we provided when I was on that team. And that continues to be, I still log on every day to Messari, even though I don't work there anymore, and scroll through the Intel feed because there's just so much information. And there's a lot of noise at times because they do want to cover as much as they possibly can so that no one goes, why didn't you cover that or miss that? But you can tailor your alerts or what you track by, I mean, when we got these events, like the maple to syrup conversion, we would categorize them by significance, market impact, things like that, so that ultimately you as the end user could say, I only want to follow high impact events. And you can filter out, like the lower, less important things that might be going on in the crypto world. But I mean, hundreds of assets, all kinds of categories and impact classifications so that you can really tailor your experience. And that's what I did. It was only one part of what Messari offers. They have a lot of other stuff that they do, like research and protocol services. And there's a lot of stuff that they do. It's really a versatile company that, in my opinion, provides some of the most value to the entire crypto ecosystem, for whether you're an end user like you or I might be, or an actual protocol that's looking to kind of get your name out there and get coverage and things like that. Or if you're even like a financial advisor or an investment person trying to maintain and stay up to date on trends, Messari is invaluable in my opinion.
Well, how would you say it is for like beginners? Like is it
Yeah,
beginner friendly?
I would start out with the free plan. I think they have a pro plan. You're questioning me here. You're testing me. I believe they have like a pro
No
plan,
worries.
like $30 a month. If you end up going, okay, I know they got this behind a paywall, and I think this would be interesting. I'd like to see more of this. But they definitely have a free plan that kind of exposes you to what they offer and allows people to get their feet wet and understand metrics like TVL and transactions per second and all kinds of other stats that I'm only scratching the surface on. But they definitely have a free plan, and I would definitely recommend people add it to like their tool set of the crypto universe to try and understand what's going on in the world.
Absolutely. We had a guest recently that recommended it as well for beginners just to kind of
Yeah.
understand the ecosystem and how things
Yes.
function. And the
Yeah.
things that you're saying, like transactions per second, layer twos, like all these different kinds of
Yeah.
concepts, or, like, when you were talking earlier and I was thinking in my head, when I first started out in crypto, I had a directed study, and just like how you really wouldn't want to read your journal entries now, reading my crypto directed study, we all have to start somewhere. And,
Yeah,
if that's a great resource to start somewhere, then absolutely. And the fact that you worked there and basically you were kind of just keeping people in the loop of what was going on. Correct me if
yeah,
I'm wrong,
yeah,
but
yeah.
that's
I mean, that's
awesome.
essentially it. And like I mentioned earlier, I'm not trying to. At times, I beat myself up. I'm like, how the heck did I even write that? Why is that even a thing? What is that? What was I even thinking? But I'm not going to knock myself because that's a part of the process. And if there's any listeners out there who are at one point in the same shoes that I was in, bet on yourself. I mean, you can't fake it. Like you gotta know your stuff. And I think take calculated risks, and you can't just like quit your day job because there's some new shiny thing. And I mean, maybe some people can. That was not me. I wanted to have, the assurance that I could pay my rent and things like that and not just like be going paycheck to paycheck. But I saw that I was prepared enough and I learned enough and I was interested enough to the point where I was like, all right, this writing has taught me a lot, but it's time for me to explore something else. And that's what got me a job at Messari. And inevitably that job at Messari got me into my current position. So it's been a process, a journey, and I'm not trying to knock myself because everybody has to start somewhere, like you said.
No, you've been doing amazing. I don't know why you're so hard
No,
on
I
yourself.
mean, I understand. It's just that I know there's probably some other people out there today that are like, I don't know as much as this person. They write about these things and imposter syndrome. Like they they clearly know more than me. I can't have that job or do what they're doing or have the level of success that they present themselves as possibly having, even though everybody presents only highlight reels on social media and not like their down days. But
It's
like
very true.
it's a process. Do the best that you can every day, day in, day out, and eventually like it'll all come full circle.
Yeah, and I wanted to say too, like you're so valid for saying that because even especially in the crypto space, we're pioneers to a lot of this information.
Yeah.
So a lot of what you're learning is self-taught. Like I started, in the crypto atmosphere in 2019, and even though crypto was like had already existed, there were a lot of things that I was still learning. Like we're coming into crypto
Right.
regulation with this current administration. So it's like we're all pioneers in this atmosphere, so but you're right, it can be intimidating when you're going on social media
Yeah.
and reading all the news and stuff, so
Absolutely.
that you're so right, and I'm, like, here to second that. Just take a leap on your journey in crypto and start learning, join the podcast or go on Messari and
Absolutely. Any little breadcrumb you can get, like just take it, run with it. I mean, do whatever you can and get the most out of it that you possibly can do with it. And if it doesn't work out, then as long as you didn't like bet your entire life savings on it, then all will probably be fine. So that'd
Right,
be like
right.
the piece of recommendation. Like, don't do that. But that's a part of taking those calculated risks and building up confidence in yourself and just taking along with what the journey gives you.
Yeah, and to make anybody feel comfortable that's listening, even for myself, I interview people every week. I'm in the crypto space all the time,
Yeah,
and I'm sure you can relate, RJ. But every day we're learning something new. Still, every day
absolutely.
we're, like the crypto atmosphere is never ending, and since it's still being regulated and we're still introducing it, even myself, every day I'm catching up with the news and
I
making
know.
sure that I
It's
know.
I was literally thinking this the other day. So I played football in college. I mean, I played sports my entire life, and there's this saying in football, I know it exists in other sports as well, but like you're chasing perfection, knowing that you will never arrive at perfection. And in my current profession and in crypto in general, I hope one day I wake up and I'm like, I'm good. I got it all figured out. I can go on autopilot. I can cruise, but that just doesn't exist, and it likely won't in our lifetimes because we're in this exponential curve of adoption right now that requires, unfortunately, and for the better at times, but like constant attention and learning and progression that is what I equate back to my sports playing days where like we're chasing complete understanding in crypto, aka perfection in the sports world. That will honestly probably we will never reach that. But the best we can do every day is try and get one step closer. Ultimately knowing that we will all none of there's not one person on the planet, no matter the crypto influencer or guru investor that posts screenshots of their Robinhood account. Not one of these people have arrived in that sense, and they never will.
And you're so right to say that, and I'm so thankful that you said that because it is even myself, like, I get intimidated by people in the space, and I have to remind myself of how far I've come on my journey and how much work that I've put in. So you're so right, like, start your journey, put in the work, learn something new every single day in crypto. If you're
Yeah.
confused, there's a network of people that you can reach out to help,
Yes.
so and you've come so far, you've done great so far, and, like, you've worked for pretty known companies, and now I thought you had said you're still doing Intel, if that's correct with this new company that you're working for, or am I
No,
wrong?
I really what I currently do is I work for a trading firm, and what I am my main objective as a research associate is on-chain research with a sprinkle of macroeconomic research, and that on-chain research revolves around Bitcoin, as I said earlier. That's like where I mean, I wake up and look at Bitcoin from the start of the day to the end of the day, and in all honesty, like I have allocations to altcoins, and I believe there are some altcoins that hold promise, but I find it ironic just because I know it's not the case as much anymore because there are so many different entry points into crypto with your pumped out fund stuff and meme coin
Oh,
casinos.
yeah.
Whereas I'm old as shit. Sorry, I'm old now. So my back in the day, like my first entry point and exposure to crypto was Bitcoin and to a lesser extent Ethereum, and that was like the rabbit hole that I eventually went down. So all this is to say is that I find it poetic that my first entry point or interest into crypto was Bitcoin. Like I mean, I got a copy of the Bitcoin Standard, this book right here on top of my desk that is like a great book. I highly recommend many people read it as if you're interested in history and philosophy and finance. It blends all these things together, which I find very formative and likely shaped a lot of what I believe in today. But started with Bitcoin and now like I went through this journey uh, kind of at like the Motley Fool and into Messari where especially at Messari where like I said I was covering like my coverage was like a mile wide and inch deep. Like I was covering DeFi, altcoins, all of these things and now I'm back to this just Bitcoin centric daily tasks. So ironic, I guess, a little bit, but I love it and it's super fun.
I think, having that experience in spreading yourself thin and all those different topics was essential for your education, you
Oh
know?
yeah,
And now that you're educated, going back to Bitcoin and actually understanding this foundation, you can take it a lot deeper now.
yeah,
So and that's usually how it works and it functions too. Most people, they have to learn all these different topics before they can actually conceptualize what Bitcoin is at a deeper level. I guess I would ask you, to anybody that's listening that's interested in maybe your former career of doing intel or stuff like that, what are some good things that you saw and what are some bad things that you saw? Or maybe just, we cover scams and schemes that happen on the podcast. Is there anything that you've seen even in that industry that's not so great?
yeah. A lot of my time, not a lot, but in covering that mile wide scale at Masari, I mean, I had all types of what I'd call like feelers, like I mean, constant alerts and notifications in these Discord groups and Twitter accounts, X accounts, what else? All kinds of things that I constantly was checking on a daily basis, twice, multiple times a day. And yes, the hacks, the shady tokenomics, in my opinion, are one of like the most devious but not well understood or known aspects of crypto that just extract value from the average token holder. So I would say understanding maybe not so much scams. Don't click on links. Don't click on links from shady individuals. And
Right.
I know that's kind of basic, but I would challenge listeners, especially new ones that are interested in investing in some altcoins, to fully understand the tokenomic schemes behind these projects because so many of them parade as these value boosting investments that are here for the long haul and are doing something that has never been done before.
When you
I
say
call BS. Like that should be you should be skeptical immediately and for most of your investigative and research process until you can arrive at like an objective conclusion.
That's great. Not to cut you off.
No, you're good.
I wanted to have you explain to the audience
Yeah.
what you mean by tokenomics. Looking into the tokenomics, what do you
There's
mean by that?
there's several things and I was gonna explain a little bit further, but
Go ahead.
there's several things that go into it and there's not a checklist and to be honest, every project is a little different. But you should look at how much of this, what's the inflation rate of the currency? Does it have a set inflation rate of 5% a year? You could probably, some inflation is actually good initially when a project launches because it gets some liquidity out there and kind of establishes like a baseline. So that's not necessarily a bad thing, but like look at the inflation, the emissions is what it's called. So check emissions, understand how much the allocations of the token. Is it completely, is a majority of it owned by VCs and insiders? The Bitcoin standard sitting above my desk right now would call the author of that, would call every other cryptocurrency except Bitcoin a shitcoin. And I don't totally agree with that, but I can see the legitimacy in it because there are so many insiders these days that are funded by VCs that just hoard these tokens. They go to the token generation event, and at that point when retail is available to purchase these coins, they just start, that's the exit liquidity. They just start dumping these coins onto average Joes like us. And understanding the initial allocations of the currency, the emissions, those are like probably the top two things I would say people need to understand. There's a couple other things I'm sure I'm not thinking off the top of my head, but those two would probably get you half of the way there. And understanding that is vitally important to make sure that you're not the exit liquidity.
Absolutely. That's great. And I covered that in the podcast a little bit ago, but on a different topic, mainly talking about native tokens for all these business entities. And we were covering like FTX and Celsius that we were covering
Yeah.
too. So it's like it's crucial to look into how the business model is functioning too. And I've talked about it so
Yeah.
many times on the podcast. Before you just go and invest in a coin, do your research, meet with these people in person, go to certain events and make sure that what you're investing in is legit and you actually utilize it yourself. You're not falling into these get rich quick schemes, which are plentiful on Twitter too as well, or X. So I think what you said is valid. And I also just wanted to comment on and say that I agree with you. I think Bitcoin is obviously one of the most important cryptocurrencies out there and also blockchain. But
Yeah.
Ethereum and Solana also have a lot of potential too. It highly depends on their use cases. Like I know some major companies look into Solana for payment processing, and then the gaming network is crazy on Ethereum for all the Web3. So it really depends on where you are in the space. But of course, Bitcoin is kind of like a digital gold. It's going to be a new
Yeah.
gold standard in a way. So I think everything that you said was really valid. This is why we need to talk about these things because people the social media and influencing has become such a huge thing in the last 5 years, and you have a huge following, for example, or, if you made $1 million in crypto, all of a sudden you're deemed credible, and I don't think we should evaluate credibility with how many millions you've made in crypto, because to be honest, a lot of people have gotten extremely lucky in this investment. And we're trying to raise awareness around the scams and schemes and the get rich quick schemes of crypto. I think that you are a great source for people to hear from in regards to constructing somewhat of a successful crypto portfolio. And of
So
course, we're not preaching financial advice on the podcast, but
not one bit.
like, yeah, not
Not one
one
bit.
bit, but it would be good to have you as a resource to share that. So what would you suggest? I mean,
I mean, if I had to boil it down to like one question, it's going to be like, what is your risk tolerance? And what are your goals? Like, I guess so too. And they kind of go hand in hand. But yeah, when you're young, I'm not telling people to go buy some stupid meme coin that launched yesterday by some influencer. But if you're younger 20s, if you've done your research, you understand the tokenomics of a project, and you've arrived at some objective truth that this project does something innovative that is not just like a copy and paste with a like spin on some other existing project that they just parade around as some cool new thing that's really not that new or innovative. If you've done your research, you've arrived at this conclusion, but you understand that it carries a little bit of risk, and you're in your younger 20s and maybe even younger than 20, that is within reason, in my opinion. It goes back to, if the opposite though is true, in that you don't have that risk tolerance and you are truly trying to set yourself up for retirement and whatnot. I'm of the opinion, like, I want to be retired in a sense. I'll probably never stop working, but I want to arrive at the point in my life where I don't need my job. I just do what I do because I love it. And honestly, that's what I have in my current job. Like, I absolutely love it. So I just got to get the bags, a couple more zeros on the end of the bag, and then I'll
right.
be totally cruising. But like, that's my goal, is to arrive at that point where I got the zeros at the end and I'm just doing what I do because I love it. So for me, like that involves some riskier, high conviction plays, but in the crypto world, probably keeping it a little bit safer. And I'll fully stand by that and acknowledge it. And I guess we can hash it out in the comments if other people don't agree with that strategy. But it is so easy to lose money in this industry and in this space that just making money for the long haul is an accomplishment in itself. So in doing so, like I believe you can arrive at that level of success if you initially just start with what is my risk tolerance and what are my goals. And if you go from there, I think you'll end up finding your ideal allocations and whatnot. And hopefully, I hope for every listener out there that they arrive at this end goal that they have for their life because they realize the opportunity that's in front of them, and that is that crypto is this new financial asset class that still has value accrual and likely, in my opinion, decades of it ahead of it.
Absolutely. And I think if you are a beginner into crypto, you should definitely read into the SEC and Project Crypto. That would also be a really good place to start if you're trying to figure out how crypto is about to evolve into our financial systems. Let's
Yeah,
say, you understand stocks already, you understand the basic financial system. The SEC, I think it's Paul Atkins, I could be wrong, but
yeah,
reading in on what he's talking about
yeah,
and how crypto is going to play in will help you. I want to say too that I think you have two choices in crypto. You can either fall into all the altcoins and the meme coins and the scams and schemes and the get rich quick mentalities, which would be a hard start for you, but at least you'd like learn valuable lessons. Or, you could take the path of reading books and doing research and really trying to understand this journey before you embark on it. Cause then you might realize, I mean, obviously I don't give financial advice on the podcast, but like I've dabbled in maybe a couple altcoins, but a lot of my investments are just in the main coins, Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana,
yeah.
the ones that I know have a lot of
Staying
value and
power. Yeah.
yeah, stay in power and have the potential to impact society as a business function too, as a business model.
Yeah, there's a few. Let
So
me touch on that a little bit because there's a few things that I wanted to mention earlier that I didn't. So I'll start with this. One, the idea that there's all kinds of researchers out there that like try and place a value on a token of some new blockchain or project. They say this token should theoretically be worth this amount because it provides this type of economic value. And what I would like listeners to understand is that those are noble attempts, and there's some legitimacy to those models and whatnot, and the methodology behind them. But in the grand scheme of things, there's literally, in my opinion, almost no way to value the majority of cryptocurrencies today based on. I'm not saying this from like a traditional economic framework, but trying to assign a value of what would be a good one. I'm trying to think of like a top 50. I'll go with Stacks. If you know what Stacks is,
yes, yes.
it's like a Bitcoin layer 2 project.
Mhm.
There are some sort of models that you could kind of fudge some numbers together and be like, well, this Ethereum layer 2 is worth this much because it commands this percent of Ethereum's TVL. That means Stacks should be worth this much as well. And there's other more exotic and fancy ways to try and value different cryptocurrencies aside from what I just said in a real basic sense. But all this is to say is that most of these cryptocurrencies are extremely difficult to value outside of maybe your top 10 that have at least some sort of product market fit and like a moat around them. So when you look at your risk reward setups in some of your investments, try and think about that. Like just because you read some article or some research paper or some influencer said, well, it was worth this amount back then during some crazy pump that was not sustainable, and it's doing better numbers today in terms of like the underlying metrics of this project as opposed to what the price is showing, does not mean that that cryptocurrency has to be worth that amount that it was previously. Those are apples to oranges. That was a different time under different liquidity circumstances, under a different environment. Now, is it important that they have growth in the underlying metrics and whatnot? Yes, it is. And that goes into part of the research that we need to do to arrive at these conclusions to say, I've seen this organic growth underlying this project. Yes, its value does not match what it was worth 6 months ago when its underlying metrics were even worse. But just do an apples to apples comparison is where I see a lot of people get burned in that. I think a great example is Celestia. If you're familiar with Celestia, like they have this organic growth, purely VC funded cryptocurrency project that is now almost worthless and is down like 500% or something like that.
Yeah.
It's literally just tanked. It had all of the growth metrics behind it and influencers parading this organic growth, but nothing stuck. And here we are now, I think 2 years since it's launched, and it's worthless. Understanding what your projects, your investments attempt to solve, and if they're actually solving them is vitally important. And understanding that it is extremely difficult to value cryptocurrencies. And the idea that these altcoins have product market fit, all of them have some sort of product market fit, is a long shot. And in my opinion, like a fool's errand. It's just not the case. It is not, it is going to be a winner take all with 4 to 5 winners, is what I would say in the grand scheme of things.
Absolutely, and everybody's always looking for the next big thing, the next big thing, the next big thing. And
Yeah.
I think in also understanding crypto and cryptocurrencies, a lot of cryptocurrencies and like majority of them are supply and demand. Now, we're going into stable coins with the current administration. So, and actually I wanted to switch gears and hear your thoughts on the current administration and what you think because obviously they're in huge favor of crypto, but we're
Yeah.
we're starting to see some sort of regulation with crypto and stable coins. And I guess I have a few questions for you. First, we can talk about the administration, or maybe also when you're going every single day to check out crypto prices like Bitcoin, Ethereum, etc. Are you going on Messari for that, or are you going somewhere else to look up daily prices and all that?
I live on a daily basis in a platform called Glassnode, which is specifically tailored for what are called on-chain metrics. That is, I mean, I wake up every day, log into Glassnode, spend most of my time there, catch up on macroeconomic related events, and that's about it. I get on Messari, like I said earlier. Messari is a staple into my daily routine, but
Right.
a fraction of it because the responsibilities of my current job have changed where I live per se in the digital world.
No, that's awesome. I wanted to include that as a resource for anybody that's interested too, because you gave a really good resource for Masari. So I was just curious to see where you get that
Yeah.
information as well. So that's good for anybody. Now they can kind of follow your daily routine and stay on track with learning.
So if there's anybody interested in like what are called on-chain metrics, which is basically tracking the spending behaviors of investors, I would say. Are investors, when they spend, are they realizing profits or losses? Are they, what's another good example? Is there more money coming into this cryptocurrency over the last week versus the last 30 days? What percent of the supply is owned by investors in the last 3 months versus the last 12 months? And you can kind of like, in that scenario, like you can understand how much recent buying, if there's a lot of the supply that has changed hands in the last 3 months, that can be indicative of several things. Versus if the supply that was last transacted is 70% of it is 12 months or older, that would indicate that there's more of a preference of holding right now and there's not that much interest in the cryptocurrency. So there's a lot of these things that can be going on that are trackable from an on-chain perspective, and I'm only scratching the surface. There's a wealth of information on Glassnode is the platform. Shout out to Glassnode because they allow me to do my job and have helped me understand the market from a different perspective. This is something that I find, and why I enjoy my job so much, to be honest, is because on-chain metrics it does not exist for any other asset except cryptocurrencies. You can't get an insight into the spending behaviors of investors for stocks or commodities or real estate like this, like the granularity that you can get on literally like an hourly basis if you wanted, or a 10-minute basis if you so choose. Like that's a lot of data that's getting conveyed. Is there a lot of noise in the 10-minute data? Yes, certainly. But you can zoom out to a day, to a weekly, and you can see these spending patterns, the buying patterns, and there's a lot of signal in that most people probably aren't aware of.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's great. We bring people onto the podcast to give resources to help people
Yeah.
go on the right track, find the right information, do the right research, and learn the right things they need to. While we're on this topic, is there anything else you want to give anybody? Like any
Oh
books,
man.
for example? I know you were been
Uh,
referencing the
the bit-
Bitcoin standard.
for any history, philosophy, what the heck is Bitcoin type of people out there, I would highly recommend the Bitcoin Standard. I'm not a big reader. I try to read like 10 pages a day. That isn't like on a screen. So like I actually like having like an actual book. And I read that book probably 4 years ago, 5 years ago now. And it was awesome. Just from like I said, like it doesn't even talk about Bitcoin for the first 100 pages, which is why I find it so insightful because the author does such a good job of talking about just money and history and philosophy and these other aspects that then he very elegantly ties into Bitcoin later on in the book. So highly recommend that one. For other websites, I don't read a lot of crypto books because I read so much and stay up to date from the hours of 8 to 5 every day that are crypto related.
Right.
So I like to escape a little bit. But in terms
Yeah.
of other, I've really found as much as I kind of bagged on X and the social media influencers within crypto, I would highly recommend finding I believe it's more important than ever that we understand as crypto investors the macro landscape, and that is probably where I've experienced the most growth over the last year and a half. I would say is that as Bitcoin and stable coins and Ethereum and these other maybe more large scale cryptocurrencies enter the traditional finance foray, that you need to understand the pressure points and the environment that the bigger players live in. So it isn't just COVID stimulus checks that are pumping bags. There are more nuanced things that are going to be driving the markets now. And in a simple sense, you could say just interest rates, but I'm talking like you need to you don't need to. It will be helpful to understand the current state of affairs in the macro world. And you don't need to get totally into the weeds, but that's where I believe finding some researchers on X, and I'm going to switch real quick. I think Substack has been an extremely, if anybody's familiar with Substack, that has been maybe where I spend most of my time reading more longer form content and understanding other stuff going on in the world. And that is in a sense almost like X. I mean, anybody can create a Substack and write their own ideas and thoughts out there, but it is longer form content. You can do video and subscriber exclusive, depending on what the author does, more premium services, in my opinion. But a lot of information in Substack, and like anything, you need to be critical about what you read. But that has been extremely helpful to give me more longer form content instead of just scrolling on X and reading some hot takes that someone just posts because they want some sort of interaction.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And that's a lot of the big issues on X too. And I was talking to somebody who's actually coming on the show shortly, and they were just talking about all the bots on X too and all the people that are just looking to gain followings in the space and
Yeah,
charge for their X spaces to come into
yeah,
them. So that's for that whole nother conversation for a different day. But I want to say I will have all those resources linked below. So if anybody is interested in
for
exploring any of
sure.
those avenues, they'll be down below.
Yeah, virtually all of those Glassnode, Messari have like the free plans for anybody to, like I said, just
Perfect.
explore and kind of get an understanding of what they offer.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. Thank you for the resources. I ask everybody that comes on for their
And
own
Substack,
preference.
get your Substack game up a little bit. Some of them cost money, but once you find the right ones, they can be extremely helpful in trying to like understand different forms of opinions that aren't just like I said, hot takes that press your buttons.
Yeah, or feeling pressured to invest in the next altcoin, the next meme coin, like gathering
I'm
we can't go.
just like I just want like if you're seeing it on Twitter, I'm going to tell you you're probably already late.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. That's
So
true.
you should probably not take investing advice from anybody on Twitter. And to be honest, like I'm one of those people. I mean, I'll bet on sports every once in a while. I feel better when I lose my money because of my own conviction, as opposed to when I see someone say, just bet on the Yankees because see it on X. This pitcher is pitching today, and the other team has a terrible batting average against this pitcher. You should bet on the Yankees today. And I listen to that person, and then I lose my money, and I'm like, I hate that person. I would
Yeah.
rather just bet, almost in a sense, invest on my own conviction and research. And if I lose money, then I guess I need to be better. So all that is to say is that stop taking advice from people on Twitter. If you're reading that advice on Twitter, you're probably already late to the movement, to the investment. So it really starts with nothing else other than like hard work and almost to a certain extent going against the current wave of thinking, in that when things are bad, those are probably the times to invest. And I know that's a double-edged sword because someone could say invest in Celestia right now as it's down 500%. But
Right. Yeah.
you got to do your research and understand the environment. But when things are not looking great and they're kind of looking shaky, like that is when there's the most upside opportunity in investments.
I love that advice and I love all the resources that you gave to help people. I want to close this out by just getting your thoughts about the current administration and your thoughts about the crypto regulation.
Yeah,
Just basically anything that you or just anything else you'd like to tell the audience that you feel like they didn't hear.
sure. We'll stick with the administration because I think it's been obviously like the most controversial or publicized development to occur in crypto in quite a while. I would say there's obviously been some sort of letdown to a certain extent by many retail investors that, the US government was going to buy Bitcoin and create this strategic reserve. And while it kind of came into fruition, it was like a half-ass effort in that they just said, we're not going to sell the seized holdings that we've gotten from criminal investigations and things like that. All the better, I guess. It's kind of like I said, like a half-ass win. But I believe the attention needs to be on what you said earlier, which is like the agencies, the SEC, the CFTC. So that's like the commodities agency branch. The
Yes,
SEC is
yes.
the securities branch that's going to monitor stocks and stuff like that. Bitcoin has been basically been deemed a commodity, and there's a lot of controversy that Ethereum is a commodity as well. So all it is to say is that if you keep your tabs on those two agencies, there's a lot of information that's been coming out, such as, especially with the SEC, because the majority of cryptocurrencies are likely going to be deemed securities and fall under the regulatory purview of the SEC. So, in particular, like with the SEC, as you mentioned earlier, Paul Atkins, the new SEC chairman who replaced Gary Gensler, who sucked, he has said that it's a priority for this administration, or for his administration, not, I mean, Trump's as well, but the new SEC administration, to understand that cryptocurrencies represent an evolution in finance. And this idea that finance has to be static and it can't change, I need people to understand that that's not the case. And that's what I would call like boomer mentality.
Yeah.
An ETF, if anybody knows what an ETF is, like an ETF did not exist 20 years ago, 25, 30 years ago. That was like a novel innovation in finance. Finance changes, and that's okay. And honestly, I commend the SEC and Paul Atkins for saying like blockchain rails and these cryptocurrencies present a new way to do finance, and to just stick our nose up at it like Gary Gensler did and say we're not going to even explore or give it the time of day is setting yourself up for failure. And ultimately, as the Democrats and some other political parties and representatives found out, a way that you lose voters and you drive innovation offshore to other countries. A year ago, we saw a lot of these companies set up shop in different countries that had more favorable crypto regulations, where they allowed innovation to take place organically. And now that is kind of coming back home to the US, which is encouraging because, like, I mean, whatever. I hope everybody wins. I hope every country kind of wins, but like I want my country to win a little bit too, especially because it's in my industry and like I don't have to go do my job somewhere else because my industry is being stifled by an administration or regulatory policy. So that feels good. And I would say that the SEC, there are clear tailwinds being formed in what they're trying to do just by sitting down and having these conversations with the heads of crypto companies and saying that we're going to explore what type of benefits tokenized stocks bring to the world and things like that. So let's maybe, what I'd ask listeners to do is expand beyond just what Trump says behind a camera and what some of his colleagues that are likely they probably couldn't even explain what Bitcoin is, and maybe
Right.
focus more on like the agencies that are maybe a little bit more smaller in scale, but probably carry more importance.
And I would also say pay attention to regulation in the crypto space. I think that's going to be the most important thing too. And we have a lot of people on the show too. Like I have a CPA coming on shortly to help with crypto, like
Yeah.
bookkeeping,
No,
taxes and
I think
stuff.
that's another great that kind of exists under the radar, like the Genius Act, if you're familiar with that.
Yes.
That got a lot of coverage and deservedly so, but there are even some accounting changes and standards that have been updated to account for recognizing the fair value of cryptocurrencies that, again, don't get as much publicity, but arguably carry more significance in the long run.
And just to kind of finalize your whole point on the administration too, I think the whole with the United States, we're the country of innovation, you know, like the
Yeah,
American dream, you know, like starting your own business. And
certainly.
I think the biggest problem, which we're hopefully slowly starting to solve within the crypto industry, is that it's not that the industry itself is bad and crypto is bad. It's all the bad people that have been in the crypto space that have, to be honest, like completely ruined the reputation and image
Yeah,
of crypto that we're trying to restore.
yeah.
So I think the advice that you gave is very valuable, and just my 2 cents in that is just that
Well,
we should.
I agree with you, and I'll say this, and I'll put my tinfoil hat up and get off my soapbox. But I need people to understand that, like I said, the majority of altcoins probably relative to Bitcoin are going to zero in the grand scheme of things. But the bad rap that crypto gets, I would like people. I was talking this with one of my friends the other day. The bad rap that crypto gets from those like Elizabeth Warren and some other people that aren't big fans. I need you to understand that the current environment, the current administration, not the administration, the current political, the entirety of the political system revolves around tracking people's bank accounts. And not like they're like tracking what you spend at the gas station on a daily basis, but like trying to track for money laundering, trying to make sure people pay their taxes, trying to make sure that this company isn't funneling money through this other company. Whether it's for the better or the worse, they cannot control those funds when it flows through crypto chains. And it makes sense for this stigma to exist for many people before they understand crypto, for them to be like, well, crypto's just a scam. It's used by criminals, yada, yada, yada. The same things we've all heard. And we've all had to go against these stereotypes and actually understand what it truly provides and does. While those cases certainly do exist, that people launder money and criminal enterprises through crypto, the bad rap comes from the fact that it circumnavigates virtually all control that exists in the current financial system, where they can track your taxes. And I'm not saying don't pay your taxes, but I'm saying that it gets a bad rap because they don't want to tell you exactly why they don't like it. They're going to tell you that criminals use it and it's for shady organizations and whatnot, as opposed to just being like, imagine if one of these politicians got up and said, we don't like crypto because people can evade taxes and it basically siphons out our main funding source to continue to borrow at a deficit and drive up debts. They would never get up in front of a podium and say that.
Yeah, it's the power struggle. It's the
Yeah,
power struggle and the freedom that not even just crypto, but like blockchain and DeFi and
total
fintech.
transparency, total
Yeah.
transparency, totally open source, totally democratized, which doesn't to a certain extent exist as much as we hope it does not exist in the current market today or the current political system.
I think you're completely correct. And
But
everything that
that's a story for another day.
I
I
know,
could
I
read an
know there
entire book.
well, there's a lot to go into,
Yeah,
especially talking about the policies in the administration and like the actual heads that are kind of monitoring the crypto space right now. And I'm saying that lightly. So it's the main thing that we try to do on Cryptic Humility is bring people on, start these conversations, get involved in
definitely.
the conversations, educate yourself correctly, but also never ever like we are here to shed truth and light on everything
Yeah.
that's been kept in the dark in the crypto space. So, RJ, I want to thank you so much for coming on to the show. Is there anything left that you want to tell the
No,
audience? I
that's
think
it.
we
That's
covered a
it.
lot.
We
We
ended with a
covered a lot.
bang a little bit. I don't want people to think I'm that crazy, but I appreciate you having me on, Vanessa. It was an absolute blast. I hope to be back on soon.
Oh my god, you definitely will within a year, like year recap. We'd love to have you on. I'll have all your resources below. We'll talk after this to get that information if anybody's looking to contact you. And
Yeah, absolutely. Hit me up on X, RJ underscore Fulton underscore, so two underscores, but would love to interact and get to know some people.
Perfect. Yeah, I'll have to add
Yeah,
you on
happy to
X.
help.
I don't even have you on X.
It's all
But
good.
no worries. Thank you so much for coming on. And thank you everybody who's been watching. Good things are coming for the podcast. And we will see you guys next Monday on Cryptic Humility. Thank you.